I'm Joe Meling for Weaver Leathercraft. I love doing leather work and I'm honored that you'd spend your time with me today in hopes to better yourself as a leather crafter. I'm not here to try to convince you that there's one certain right way to do any of this stuff because I firmly believe that this is an artwork and not science. But my hope is that I can share with you some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way that have helped me and hopefully put you on the fast track to having more fun and possibly even being more profitable with your leather work. So let's head on over and get started. Today we're going to be tooling up one of the round coasters. And I'm going to wet this down. I've already taped the back of it to prevent any stretching when we go to tooling it. The pattern that we're going to use is the scroll pattern that is in the downloadable pack for the coasters. Now the pattern I've also taped, just like we've talked about preparing the patterns in the past, I've taped both sides with a clear packing tape. So as I go over this with my ballpoint stylus, it's not going to ruin the pattern and it's going to leave down a nice impression. Now it's time to tool this pattern in here. So we're going to start with the swivel knife and cut it in. Be sure to take your time because this is what's going to set the whole foundation for your pattern. As we move through our tools, if you have any questions on specifics of how we're running the tools and different tips on that, be sure to check out the series that we did on the Introduction to Floral Carving. There's where we break down all the tools and exactly how to use them. So I'm going to move around this pattern here, drawing my lines to me. Don't be afraid to move that coaster as you're tooling too. Make it comfortable and get around it. The next tool is the bevel. I'm going to use the small steep bevel to help get around some of the tighter curves in this pattern. I'm also going to use this small sandbag for a weight to help that coaster from moving when I tool it. Without it, it wants to move around there as you're beveling it. So I'm going to use this and move it around as I need to, but help keep that holding still. It's a small project like this. A lot of times they want to creep around on you when you're tooling them. As I bevel here, I'm going to start on this outside line. I'm going to go over my lines a couple times just to smooth them out and get as smooth the lines as we can. That's going to help create some flow in the pattern. The other thing to watch for is which lines we fade out and which lines we bevel deep all the way through. So any of these lines that end within the middle of the vine, like this one, we're going to fade out. Ones that stop at both ends, we can just bevel those deep all the way. But let's listen as I fade this out so you can hear the difference. As I get down to the end of one of those lines that I'm fading, we're just barely tapping it. So as we need to, pick your weight up, move that coaster around, and make it comfortable where you can reach all the lines that you need to reach without getting in an awkward position or without blocking anything with your hands. So you got to be able to see that face of the bevel on your line. Take time as you're beveling and make sure you get those lines as smooth as you can. And also pay attention to what side of the lines you're beveling on. I know that can be a confusing thing as you get started and maybe hard to see in some of the patterns. So let's take a look at what lines are in this pattern here. There's really just a few lines that make this pattern up. Outside this vine work here, out on the tip, comes down, and then around that swirl on the outside and one little line on the inside. And then that mirrors in all four corners. The next tool that we're going to move to is the small pear shader. And that one there is going to start getting that definition within the vines. So I'm going to use that out here on the tips of these points. But I'm going to run that and fade that out to make it look not like a tool mark, but really just get some good shadowing in there. So I'm going to move around here, get all four of those corners, and then these little stumps that break up in between, I'm going to go on both sides of that and kind of create a little bit of a ridge right there in the center of that. Help give some definition and stand that up. And then from here, our tools are going to go pretty dang fast. The next one is going to be this cedar. That one I'm going to set just on the inside line of all these swirls, and that's going to help create a hook or a point at the end of those. The last place we'll use that cedar is right here in the middle where all four of those lines come together. We'll just set that in there and really break that apart. That's going to be the point that our next tool this mule's foot, and that's the small mule's foot, we're gonna bring that and point it to that center seed that we just put down there. But right where those two swirls come together, we're gonna have the open end of that mule's foot and then fade that point off down towards there. Now we're gonna take the Vayner and work around all four of the swirls in this pattern. So like we talked about in the introduction to floral carving, I want to keep that tool tipped to where I'm just seeing the edge of it. I don't want that full tool impression. But also notice the curve of my tool matches the curve of that swirl. So my Vayner is going to follow that curve around here. Now this swirl goes the other way, so I need to use the other side of that Vayner as I work around that one. I'm going to go around all four of these and make all the swirls match up with that Vayner. Finally, our last step is going to be to put some decorative cuts in here. So we're going to get the swivel knife back out and help create just a little bit extra flow and add that finishing touch to our pattern. There's no exact right or wrong when it comes to these decorative cuts, but sometimes when you're starting out, it's important to remember that less is more. So don't get too carried away with them. I like putting a couple at each tips of these points, and then around my swirls, I'm going to put some in there as well. Kind of almost make a little hook on the inside there where that Vayner fades out. And remember to draw those cuts with the direction of your vine work. Thank you again for taking your time to watch with me here today. I hope you find value in what we're doing, and I can't wait to see you back here for another video.